The Court of Judgment. The air in the courtroom was suffocating, thick with the weight of expectation and silent judgment. Every seat in the gallery was occupied, filled with legal analysts, journalists, and government officials murmuring among themselves. Flashbulbs burst intermittently, capturing what had already been labeled the trial of the decade. At the defense table stood Evelyn Carter, a 17-year-old high school student, her small frame tense but composed. She was dressed in an ill-fitted black blazer over a buttoned-up white blouse, her wavy brown hair tied into a loose ponytail. In any other setting, she would have been overlooked, just another nerdy girl who spent too much time on her laptop. But here, in this grand courtroom, all eyes were on her. Evelyn was not a lawyer. She wasn't supposed to be standing there, facing a federal judge and an array of seasoned prosecutors. But when the world turned its back on her father, Dr. Thomas Carter, a renowned financial analyst accused of orchestrating a billion-dollar corporate fraud, she realized she had no other choice. Evelyn had spent months combing through encrypted files, financial ledgers, and confidential documents, unraveling a scheme that no one wanted to acknowledge. She had uncovered something that should have exonerated her father, but instead, it had made her a target. Now she stood in front of Judge Richard Holloway, a man infamous for his swift, merciless judgments. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his deep-set eyes carried the perpetual look of a man who had long since lost faith in the concept of innocence. He adjusted his glasses, looking down at Evelyn from the bench. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice thick with condescension, "I appreciate the confidence it takes to stand in this courtroom, but this is not a school debate club. Your father is accused of running one of the largest corporate frauds in U.S. history. This court does not have time for theatrics." The gallery chuckled, a low murmur rolling through the room like a wave. Some of the government officials smirked, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable failure of the teenage girl who had the audacity to challenge them. Evelyn's grip tightened on the edge of the defense table. She had expected this. In fact, she had counted on it. Let them laugh. Let them think she was weak. She inhaled sharply and turned her gaze back to Judge Holloway. Calm, unshaken, ready. "Your Honor," Evelyn said, her voice clear and deliberate, "the prosecution's case is based on fraudulent evidence. The timestamps on the financial transactions do not match the official banking logs. I have the proof." Silence. For the first time since the trial began, the courtroom shifted. A flicker of interest flashed in Holloway's gaze. Even the lead prosecutor, Samuel Crane, a cold-eyed federal attorney with a ruthless conviction record, narrowed his eyes. Evelyn pulled out a stack of crisp documents from her case file and held them up for everyone to see. These records contain time-stamped financial transactions that allegedly tie my father to this scandal. However, after cross-referencing with independent banking logs from international servers, I discovered that the timestamps had been manipulated. Murmurs erupted from the gallery. Evelyn pressed on. "Not only that, but these discrepancies prove that the transactions continued even after my father's arrest." Crane scoffed. "This is absurd. We are wasting time on the paranoid delusions of a desperate child." Evelyn met his gaze, unwavering. "Then let me present my findings. If I'm wrong, what are you afraid of?" Crane's smirk faded. He was about to respond when, bang! The courtroom doors flew open, crashing against the marble walls. A dozen federal agents stormed inside, their dark uniforms marked with Homeland Security insignias. Their presence sent an electric charge through the room. Evelyn Carter, one of the lead agents, barked, "Step away from the table. You are under arrest for unauthorized access to classified financial records." The courtroom erupted into chaos. "No," Dr. Carter shouted, lurching to his feet. He tried to push past the guards, but two officers restrained him, forcing him back into his chair. Evelyn's heart pounded. Her fingers clenched around the documents. This wasn't about the evidence. This wasn't about justice. This was a setup. Judge Holloway sat motionless, his expression carefully neutral. Crane didn't even look surprised. They had planned this. She had gotten too close. A strong hand seized her arm, yanking it behind her back. Cold steel handcuffs snapped around her wrists. "Wait, no," Evelyn gasped. "This is a mistake. Enough," the agent growled. "You're coming with us." Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists scrambled to record the spectacle. The teenager who had dared to challenge the system, now being dragged away in cuffs. Judge Holloway exhaled, rubbing his temple as if exhausted by the entire ordeal. "This court is adjourned," he said dryly, slamming his gavel. Evelyn struggled against the agent's grip. "No. I have the proof. I can prove it." But no one was listening. As they pulled her toward the exit, her vision blurred. Her father's desperate shouts rang in her ears. She had come here to fight for his freedom. Now she was fighting for her own. The prisoner's dilemma. A cell built for silence. The cold, dimly lit walls of Southgate Federal Detention Facility loomed around Evelyn Carter like the inside of a tomb. The 16-foot concrete cell contained little more than a cot bolted to the floor, a steel toilet, and a small table where a single, flickering overhead light buzzed endlessly. Evelyn sat on the cot, her arms folded over her chest, her body stiff. The cuffs had been removed, but the red marks on her wrists still burned, a reminder that she was no longer a high school student. She was now a federal prisoner. Her arrest had happened so fast that it felt like a fever dream. 1 minute she had been exposing the truth in a grand courtroom, and the next she was hauled away like a criminal. The system she thought was built for justice had crushed her beneath its heel without hesitation. Her mind was still spinning. Her father was still in prison. The proof, the documents, the financial records, the evidence she had risked everything to collect, had been ripped from her hands before she could finish presenting it. And now, no one was coming to help. The door buzzed sharply. A second later, it swung open with a loud clang. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, their expressions blank. "Carter, on your feet," one of them ordered. Evelyn hesitated. "Where are you taking me?" The taller officer didn't answer. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, and pulled her to her feet. "You have a visitor." Her breath caught. "Who?" No response. As they led her down the long, sterile hallway, Evelyn's mind raced. No one should have been able to visit her. She hadn't been given a phone call, and there was no lawyer assigned to her case. Whoever had arranged this meeting had power. That made her nervous. The officers brought her to interrogation room 3. One of them swiped his keycard, and the steel door buzzed open. Evelyn stepped inside and froze. Sitting at the table, waiting for her, was Samuel Crane, the lead prosecutor from her father's trial. He was still in his perfectly pressed navy blue suit, his silver tie knotted neatly beneath his collar. His calculating eyes tracked her every movement like a predator watching wounded prey. "Have a seat, Miss Carter," he said smoothly. Evelyn remained standing. "What do you want?" Crane's smirk was cold. He leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together. "I want to talk about your future." Evelyn's fingers curled into fists. "You mean the future you stole from me?" Crane chuckled. "Oh, Evelyn, you still think you're the victim here." She glared at him. "I didn't commit a crime. I was proving my father's innocence. But you don't care about the truth, do you?" Crane didn't even blink. "Truth is a fragile thing, Miss Carter. The only truth that matters is the one people believe. Right now, the world believes you're a criminal." He slid a thick folder across the table. Evelyn eyed it warily, but didn't touch it. "I took the liberty of preparing a plea deal for you," Crane said. "If you sign this, you'll plead guilty to unauthorized access to federal records, and in exchange, you'll get a reduced sentence. 18 months in a low-security facility. After that, you walk free." Evelyn laughed, but it came out bitter and sharp. "You really expect me to plead guilty? To admit to something I didn't do?" Crane raised an eyebrow. Of course, that's how the game is played. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. And what happens to my father? Crane's lips curled upward, but his eyes remained ice-cold. Your father is a different case entirely. The government won't be as lenient with him. He's facing 25 years. Her stomach twisted. But Crane continued, tilting his head. If you cooperate, I might be able to adjust things. Maybe we re-examine some of the evidence. Maybe we find a way to reduce his sentence. Evelyn swallowed hard. This was blackmail. It wasn't about justice. This was about control. She clenched her jaw. And if I don't sign? Crane exhaled slowly, as if disappointed. Then the full weight of the government comes crashing down on you, Miss Carter. He leaned forward, his voice low. We'll charge you with domestic cyberterrorism. That carries a sentence of 25 years to life. You'll disappear into a maximum security prison so deep in the system that people will forget you ever existed. Evelyn felt the weight of his words settle over her like a suffocating fog. He was serious. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the folder. 18 months in prison or life behind bars. She knew what most people would choose. But Evelyn wasn't most people. She took a deep breath and pushed the folder back across the table. Crane's smile faltered. His fingers drummed against the table once, twice. You're making a mistake, he murmured. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. No. You made the mistake when you framed my father, and I'm going to prove it. Crane sighed, shaking his head. That's unfortunate. He signaled to the guard near the door. Take her back to her cell. The guards grabbed Evelyn's arms and pulled her away. As she was led out of the room, Crane called after her. This was your only chance, Miss Carter. And you just threw it away. A mysterious visitor. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the conversation with Crane over and over, her pulse still racing. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to give up. And they were willing to destroy her life to make that happen. She sat up on the cot, running her fingers through her hair. Her only hope now was to find another way out, but she was completely alone. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the door to her cell opened. Not with a buzz, not with the usual loud clank. It just opened. Evelyn's breath caught. A tall man stepped inside, his face partially obscured by shadows. He wore black tactical gear, his movements smooth and controlled. Who are you? Evelyn whispered. The man held up a finger to his lips. Quiet. No time for questions. You need to come with me. Evelyn's heart pounded. You're breaking me out. The man didn't answer. He simply turned and started walking. For 1 second, Evelyn hesitated. Then she realized something. This was her only chance. Taking a deep breath, she stood and followed him into the darkness. The escape. A walk through shadows. Evelyn Carter had never experienced true fear before. Not when she stood in front of a packed courtroom, challenging the most powerful prosecutors in the country. Not even when federal agents slammed handcuffs around her wrists, dragging her away from everything she knew. But this moment, walking through the silent, dimly lit halls of Southgate Federal Detention Facility with a mysterious stranger who had just broken into her cell. This was fear. The man ahead of her moved with a quiet confidence, his black tactical gear blending into the shadows. His face was partially obscured by a mask, but his sharp, calculating eyes flicked back toward her every few steps, making sure she was keeping up. Evelyn's heart pounded in her ears as she followed, every muscle in her body tight with anxiety. Who are you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The man didn't answer. Instead, he raised a gloved hand and made a quick motion, a silent order to stay low. They had reached a security checkpoint. 2 armed guards stood in front of a thick metal door, talking quietly. A glowing biometric scanner flashed beside them, indicating restricted access. Evelyn's pulse spiked. How do we get past them? Her mysterious rescuer didn't hesitate. Moving with terrifying speed, he pulled a small device from his belt, something sleek and metallic, and pressed it against the scanner. A red light flashed once, then turned green. Before the guards could react, the door hissed open. The man lunged forward. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the first guard, twisting his arm behind his back and shoving him forward. The second guard barely had time to reach for his weapon before a sharp, precise strike to the throat dropped him to the floor. Evelyn gasped, stumbling back as the unconscious bodies crumpled to the ground. The man turned to her. His voice was low, controlled. "Move." She didn't argue. They slipped through the door, stepping into the underground levels of the facility. Evelyn had never seen this part before. It was darker, the walls made of reinforced steel, the air thick with the scent of oil and machinery. A stairwell loomed ahead, descending into deeper levels of the compound. "Where are we going?" Evelyn asked, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The man didn't stop. "Getting you out." "Why?" "Who sent you?" He hesitated for a split second, barely noticeable, but enough for her to catch it. "You'll find out soon," he muttered. That wasn't reassuring. Evelyn glanced behind her, half expecting an alarm to blare at any moment. But so far, nothing. No guards, no sirens. That was wrong. "Wait," she said, stopping in her tracks. "Why aren't they chasing us?" The man turned, his expression unreadable behind his mask. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "They let us go, didn't they?" That made him pause. Then finally he sighed. "They're tracking us." Evelyn's blood turned cold. She whirled around, scanning the dimly lit corridor. "Then this isn't a rescue. This is a trap." The man didn't deny it. Instead, he grabbed her by the wrist, yanked her toward the stairwell, and started running. A second later, bang! The explosion ripped through the hallway, shaking the walls and sending chunks of debris crashing to the floor. Evelyn screamed as a shockwave of heat and dust slammed into her, nearly knocking her off her feet. Gunfire erupted from above. "Move!" the man barked, dragging her forward. They stumbled down the stairs, dodging falling debris as the facility shook around them. The gunfire was getting closer, voices shouting, boots pounding against the metal floors. Evelyn's lungs burned as she ran faster than she ever had in her life. At the bottom of the stairwell, the man slammed into a heavy door, forcing it open. Beyond it, a parking garage. Dim, flickering lights illuminated rows of armored SUVs and black sedans. The man sprinted toward a black vehicle near the exit, yanking open the driver's side door. "Get in." Evelyn didn't hesitate. The moment her door slammed shut, the man tore out of the garage, tires screeching against the pavement. Behind them, sirens wailed, red and blue lights flashing as black vehicles poured out of the compound. "We're being followed," Evelyn shouted. "No kidding," the man muttered, gripping the wheel. The first bullet shattered the back windshield. Evelyn ducked. The man swerved hard, dodging a second round of gunfire, then slammed his foot on the gas. The speedometer climbed past 90 miles per hour, the dark city streets blurring past as they weaved through traffic. A second SUV pulled up alongside them, its passenger window rolling down. The man jerked the wheel sharply, slamming their car into the enemy vehicle. Metal shrieked as the SUV spun out, crashing into a concrete barrier. Evelyn gripped the dashboard, her heart hammering. "You're insane," she shouted. "Not insane," he shot back. "Just better than them." He cut into a side street, then took another sharp turn onto a narrow alleyway, killing the headlights as they slid into the shadows. The pursuing vehicles roared past, missing them completely. Silence. Evelyn's breath came in sharp gasps. The man exhaled, flexing his grip on the wheel. Finally, he turned to her. "You're lucky," he said. "Most people in your position don't get second chances." Evelyn swallowed, her pulse still thundering in her ears. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man reached up, pulling off his mask. For the first time, she got a good look at him. Sharp jawline, dark hair, a scar running across his left eyebrow. His expression was unreadable. "My name is Carter West." Evelyn blinked. "And who exactly are you?" His gaze didn't waver. "The only person who can help you take down the people who set you up." Into the fire. The truth is never free. The stolen black sedan tore through the rain-slicked streets, its tires screeching against the pavement as Carter West navigated the sharp turns of the industrial district. Evelyn Carter sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands still trembling from the escape. She had been prepared for danger. But she hadn't been prepared for this. A prison break. A full-on assault. A team of professionals willing to kill to keep her in custody. She glanced at Carter, who hadn't said a word since revealing his identity. His dark hair was still damp from the rain, his sharp features unreadable. The faint scar above his eyebrow twitched whenever his jaw tightened, something she had already noted he did when he was calculating his next move. Finally, Evelyn exhaled. "Are you going to explain what just happened?" Carter didn't take his eyes off the road. "I just saved your life." "No," Evelyn shot back. "You just pulled me out of a federal prison with military precision. That wasn't a last-minute jailbreak. That was planned." Carter didn't deny it. Instead, he made another sharp turn, the city lights fading behind them as they approached an abandoned warehouse near the docks. He finally slowed the car, pulling into the shadows, and killed the engine. For a moment, the only sound was Evelyn's rapid breathing and the distant hum of the city. Then Carter turned to her. "You think your father's arrest was about money?" Evelyn's fingers curled into fists. He was framed. The financial evidence was altered. "I proved it." Carter gave her a measured look. "You proved part of it." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Carter leaned forward, resting his hands on the steering wheel. "Your father didn't just uncover financial fraud. He found something else. Something bigger. And that's why they silenced him." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. What did he find? Carter's jaw tightened. "That's what we need to figure out." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "You don't even know." Carter turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I know that the senator wasn't acting alone. And I know that if we don't get to the truth before they do, you and your father will be dead before the week is over." Evelyn swallowed hard. This wasn't just about proving innocence anymore. This was a race against time. A dangerous plan. The warehouse was cold and quiet, its rusted steel walls towering around them. Inside, Carter had set up a small command center, an old wooden desk covered in files, a burner laptop, and a collection of weapons stacked in a metal crate. Evelyn took it all in with a mix of awe and suspicion. "You don't seem like some ordinary, helpful stranger," she said, crossing her arms. Carter smirked. "I'm not." "Then who are you really?" Carter exhaled, leaning against the desk. "I used to be military intelligence, special operations." Evelyn stiffened. "Used to be." "I walked away," Carter said. "Or rather, I was supposed to be dead." Evelyn's breath hitched. "What happened?" Carter hesitated. Then finally, he pulled a worn file from his desk and tossed it toward her. "This happened." Evelyn picked it up, flipping through the confidential documents inside. Her pulse spiked when she saw her father's name. Dr. Thomas Carter. Intelligence level. Restricted. Status. Investigative target. Security level. National threat. Evelyn's blood ran cold. This isn't just about fraud," she murmured. Carter nodded grimly. "No, it's about something much worse." She flipped to the next page. Encrypted transactions, high-level defense contracts, offshore accounts linked to shadow organizations. And then, at the bottom of the page, she saw a single name. Project Blackout. "What is this?" she whispered. Carter folded his arms. "Your father wasn't investigating stolen money, Evelyn. He was investigating an illegal weapons program." one that was being funded through the financial fraud he uncovered. Evelyn's stomach twisted. You're telling me this whole thing, the trial, the accusations, my father's imprisonment, it was all to cover up some kind of secret project? Carter nodded. Not just any project. A kill order program. Evelyn's breath hitched. Carter's voice dropped lower. This was never about money laundering. Your father found evidence of assassinations, staged deaths, targeted government leaks, all funded by a classified Black Ops initiative. And the people behind it. He paused. They used Senator Aldrich as a pawn to take the fall if things ever got messy. Evelyn sat frozen, her mind spinning. But there's more, Carter added. Project Blackout isn't just some old, abandoned plan. It's still running. And if we don't stop it— Evelyn stared at him, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. People are going to die. Breaking into the fortress. Evelyn rubbed her temples, trying to process everything. If this project is still active, there must be records, she said, thinking aloud. Something that ties it to the people running it. Where would they keep something like that? Carter didn't even hesitate. The Atlas Archive. Evelyn's eyes widened. That's a government facility. It's practically a fortress. Carter smirked. Exactly. Evelyn exhaled sharply. And you expect me to break into it? Carter leaned in. You already hacked into federal systems once. This time, you just have to do it from the inside. Evelyn frowned. That's suicide. Carter didn't blink. No, it's our only shot. She swallowed hard, her mind racing through the risks. Breaking into a government archive. Stealing classified files. Exposing one of the most dangerous covert operations in the country. And if they failed, they wouldn't get a second chance. Evelyn took a deep breath, forcing her hands to stop shaking. If we do this, she said slowly, we need a plan. Carter grinned. Oh, we've got a plan. Evelyn met his gaze, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something other than fear. She felt ready. The price of truth. Preparing for war. Evelyn paced inside the dimly lit warehouse, the weight of everything she had just learned pressing down on her chest. A secret assassination program. A covert operation buried beneath layers of financial fraud. A senator used as a scapegoat to keep the real masterminds hidden. This was bigger than her father. Bigger than she had ever imagined. She turned to Carter, who was seated at the wooden desk, scrolling through encrypted files on his burner laptop. The glow from the screen illuminated his sharp features, making his expression seem even more unreadable. Evelyn crossed her arms. So what's the plan? Walk into the Atlas Archive and ask politely for the files. Carter barely glanced up. Something like that, except with more explosives. Evelyn blinked. You're kidding, right? Carter smirked. Mostly. He clicked something on the laptop, then turned the screen toward her. The Atlas Archive is one of the most secure government data centers in the country. It's where they store classified records too sensitive for digital access. No remote hacking. No outside networks. Everything is kept physically secure. Evelyn frowned as she scanned the blueprints of the facility. 3 levels of underground storage. Armed security patrols. Biometric access points. This place is a fortress, she muttered. Carter nodded. Which is why we're getting inside the old-fashioned way. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Breaking in. Carter leaned back, folding his arms. Not exactly. We're getting you hired. She froze. What? Carter tapped the screen, pulling up a forged government ID with Evelyn's photo and new credentials. The Atlas Archive has an internal security flaw. They hire third-party data analysts for short-term classified contract work. People with the right clearance but not enough insider knowledge to be considered a threat. We slip you in as a contractor, you access the records from the inside, and you walk out with the files. Evelyn hesitated. That's actually kind of genius. Carter smirked. Of course it is. She exhaled slowly. And if something goes wrong? Carter's expression turned serious. Then we do it my way. And my way usually involves a lot of gunfire. Slipping into the system. The next morning, Evelyn stood in front of the Atlas Archive, a towering glass and steel government facility in the heart of the city. Her new ID badge was clipped to her blazer. Her hair was neatly tied back. She carried a thin briefcase filled with fake documents. And she was terrified. She took a deep breath. Calm. Focused. Normal. A security officer scanned her ID at the entrance. For one agonizing second, she thought the system would reject her credentials. Then, BEE. The light turned green. Go ahead, the guard said, waving her through. Evelyn stepped inside. The main hall was sleek and modern, its polished floors reflecting the glow of high-tech security monitors. Armed guards patrolled the upper levels, and hidden cameras tracked every movement. Her heart pounded as she approached the personnel check-in desk. A receptionist glanced up from her monitor. Name. Evelyn forced a polite smile. Eleanor Briggs, temporary data analyst. The woman typed something, then handed Evelyn a visitor access badge. You're assigned to level 2. Your manager is Simon Grant. He'll brief you on your task. Evelyn nodded, then made her way toward the restricted elevator. Step 1. Complete. Now came the hard part. A ghost in the system. Level 2 was a maze of cubicles, each one occupied by analysts typing away at classified reports. Evelyn found an empty workstation, setting down her briefcase. The screen in front of her flashed with encrypted data logs. She needed to move fast. Casually, she pulled a flash drive from her pocket and inserted it into the terminal. A custom script she had written days ago began running silently in the background, scanning through internal records, security reports, and restricted archives. She kept her posture relaxed, her fingers moving across the keyboard as if performing routine tasks. But her mind was racing. Where are you? Where did they hide you? Then, she found it. Project BBLACKOUT. Access restricted. Her fingers froze. She clicked on the file. A prompt appeared. ENT or LEVL4 CURITWCURED. Damn it. She needed higher clearance. Her pulse spiked when she saw the access logs. Someone else had just accessed the file moments ago. Someone else was looking at Project Blackout. Right now. She glanced around. Then she saw him. A man in a dark suit standing near the far side of the room, his gaze flicking toward her workstation. Evelyn's stomach dropped. He knows. She yanked the flash drive from the computer, grabbed her briefcase, and stood. The man started moving toward her. Run. Evelyn turned and walked calmly toward the exit. The moment she stepped into the hall, the alarms blared. The chase. Hey. Evelyn bolted. The moment the security alarms went off, she sprinted down the corridor, ignoring the shouts behind her. A red lockdown light flashed across the hallways as armed guards appeared, their radios crackling. She yanked her burner phone from her pocket and called Carter. We have a problem. Carter's voice was completely calm. On my way. She swerved around a corner, narrowly dodging a guard who lunged at her. Her only exit was through the lower levels. She hit the stairwell door, shoving through it, and taking the steps 2 at a time. Above her, guards stormed down the stairs, their boots thundering against the steel steps. Her lungs burned. She wasn't going to make it. Then, a car screeched outside. The fire exit burst open. Carter stood there, a gun in one hand, and an expression that said, I told you this would happen. Move. She dove into the car, slamming the door shut as Carter hit the gas. Bullets ripped through the air, shattering the back windshield. Carter yanked the wheel, sending the car skidding around the corner. Did you get it? He barked. Evelyn pulled out the flash drive, her hands shaking. Not everything, she admitted. But I know where the rest is. Carter's jaw clenched. Then we have one more stop to make. Evelyn swallowed hard. Where? Carter's expression was grim. The home of the man who created Project Blackout. Evelyn's heart stopped. She knew that name, because it was the name of the last person her father had contacted before he was arrested. Dr. William Sloan. And if they were going to survive this, they had to find him, before the people hunting them did. Shadows of the past. A name that could kill. The car was silent as Carter drove through the deserted industrial outskirts of the city. The broken streetlights flickered, casting long shadows over the abandoned factories and warehouses. Evelyn Carter sat in the passenger seat, her fingers gripping the flash drive she had barely managed to steal from the Atlas archive. The adrenaline was still pumping through her veins, but the weight of what they had uncovered sat like a stone in her chest. Dr. William Sloan, she murmured, staring at the name glowing on Carter's burner laptop screen. He was the architect of Project Blackout. Carter's jaw tightened. He didn't look away from the road. Yeah. And now he's our only shot at getting the truth. Evelyn exhaled sharply. If he's still alive. Carter didn't respond. Evelyn looked at the files again. Dr. William Sloan had once been one of the most powerful defense contractors in the country. His company specialized in covert operations, cyber warfare, and strategic elimination protocols. But 2 years ago, he had vanished. No news reports, no funeral, no public records. Just gone. Evelyn's fingers clenched around the flash drive. What happened to him? Carter tapped the steering wheel, thinking. Best guess. Either he went into hiding, or he was silenced. Evelyn swallowed. If he was dead, then Project Blackout was a ghost, a program without a face. But if he was alive, she turned to Carter. How do we find him? Carter smirked. We don't. Evelyn frowned. What? Carter shifted gears, taking the sharp turn down a narrow, unmarked road leading to a chain-link fence. He finds us. The ghost in the machine. The location Carter had driven them to was nothing more than an old scrapyard, filled with rusted cars and piles of discarded metal. A storm was brewing in the distance, the air thick with the scent of rain and oil. Evelyn stepped out of the car, eyeing the empty lot warily. You sure this is the right place? Carter smirked. It's not about the place. He pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number. A long silence. Then a click. Speak. The voice was distorted, run through a voice modulator. Carter leaned against the hood of the car. You know who I am. A pause. Then, I thought you were dead. Carter chuckled. Yeah, well, rumors. He glanced at Evelyn. I need to talk. Now. Another silence. Then, there's a building 2 miles from your position. Red door. You have 5 minutes. The line went dead. Evelyn frowned. That was easy. Carter pushed off the car. No, that was a test. Evelyn's pulse quickened. And if we fail it? Carter started walking. Then we don't leave alive. Meeting the mastermind. The building was an abandoned train depot, long forgotten and covered in layers of graffiti and rust. A single red door stood at the far end. Carter knocked twice. A metallic click sounded from the other side. The door swung open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and static electricity. The room was dark except for the glow of a dozen computer monitors, their screens flashing with encrypted data streams, surveillance footage, and security logs from classified government networks. Evelyn barely had time to process any of it before a man stepped out of the shadows. Dr. William Sloan. But he wasn't what she expected. Instead of a polished, high-profile scientist, the man before them was gaunt, his face lined with exhaustion and paranoia. His hair was streaked with gray, his clothes disheveled. But his eyes were still sharp, still dangerous. You shouldn't have come here, Sloan said, voice flat. Carter crossed his arms. You're the one who invited us. Sloan's eyes flicked to Evelyn, studying her, measuring. Then he sighed. I know why you're here, and I know what you think you want. Evelyn stepped forward. Then tell me the truth. Sloane's lips curled into a humorless smirk. The truth. He turned, pacing toward the monitors, fingers typing rapidly. The truth, Miss Carter, is that you and your father were never meant to know about Project Blackout. The screens change. A live feed of government kill orders, military blacklist operations, names crossed out in red. One of the names, Thomas Carter. Evelyn froze. Sloane turned back to them. Your father was never supposed to make it past the first stage of the investigation. He wasn't meant to be arrested. His expression darkened. He was supposed to be eliminated. Evelyn's stomach dropped. They were going to kill him. Sloane nodded. They tried. But someone intervened. He narrowed his gaze at Carter. Isn't that right? Evelyn's head snapped toward Carter. You? Carter's jaw clenched. Sloane chuckled. You didn't tell her, did you? He turned back to Evelyn. Your new friend here was one of the men assigned to take out your father. Evelyn's breath hitched. She stared at Carter. You were one of them. Carter didn't look away. Not anymore. Evelyn felt a cold wave of betrayal wash over her. You were going to kill my father. I didn't, Carter said, his voice steady. Because I realized what they were really doing. I turned on them. I saved him. Evelyn's hands trembled. So that makes you the good guy? Carter exhaled. No, it makes me the guy trying to fix what I helped break. Sloane interrupted. Touching. But that doesn't change the fact that you're all dead if you don't leave this city right now. Evelyn gritted her teeth. I don't want to run. She held up the flash drive. I want to expose them. Sloane's expression shifted. Then, without a word, he reached into his desk and pulled out another drive. This has everything, he said. Every mission, every transaction, every kill order linked to Project Blackout. Evelyn's heart pounded. Then why haven't you exposed them? Sloane's smirk faded. Because the moment you do, a gunshot rang out. The window shattered. Sloane's body jerked forward. Blood splattered across the monitors. Evelyn screamed. Carter grabbed her, shoving her toward the door as more gunfire erupted from the rooftops. They found us, Carter shouted. Evelyn clutched the hard drive Sloane had given her. They had the evidence. But now, they had to survive long enough to use it. The last stand. The hunt begins. Gunfire ripped through the abandoned train depot, shattering monitors and sending sparks flying. Evelyn Carter hit the ground as Carter West shoved her behind a rusted metal desk, shielding her from the bullets tearing through the walls. Her hands were shaking violently, still clutching the hard drive that contained the truth behind Project Blackout. Sloane lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Dead. Gone. Carter reloaded his pistol, gritting his teeth. They found us fast. Evelyn's pulse spiked. What do we do? Carter peered around the desk, tracking the red laser sights cutting through the darkness. We run, he muttered. Evelyn's grip on the flash drive tightened. This was it. The truth was in her hands. But what good was it if they never made it out of here alive? Carter grabbed a flashbang grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and tossed it toward the broken window. Boom! A blinding white light exploded across the room, followed by a deep, deafening shockwave. Evelyn felt her ears ring as Carter yanked her to her feet. Move, he shouted. They sprinted toward the emergency exit, bullets kicking up dust behind them as the mercenaries recovered from the blast. Carter shoved open the back door, dragging Evelyn out into the stormy night. The rain had started pouring, the city lights flickering in the distance. Evelyn gasped for air, barely able to process the chaos unfolding around her. The black SUV screeched around the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. More mercenaries. Carter cursed. We need a ride. Evelyn barely had time to react before Carter aimed his gun at an approaching car, a battered gray sedan driven by some poor, unsuspecting guide just trying to get home. Carter fired into the air. The driver swerved in panic, slamming the brakes. Carter yanked open the door, flashed his gun, and dragged the guy out. "Sorry, buddy," he muttered, shoving Evelyn into the passenger seat. Evelyn barely had time to buckle in before Carter hit the gas. The SUV behind them roared to life, giving chase. Evelyn gritted her teeth. They're not giving up. Carter took a hard turn, tires screeching. They can't. Not as long as we have that drive. The SUV gained speed, its tinted windows rolling down. Muzzle flashes. Gunfire tore through the back windshield. Evelyn ducked as glass shattered around her. Carter swerved, slamming the car into the opposite lane, dodging traffic as the SUV kept closing in. Evelyn's hands shook as she looked at the flash drive in her lap. "This isn't going to end," she murmured. Carter didn't take his eyes off the road. "Not unless we end it first." A desperate gamble. They needed a way out. But running wouldn't be enough. They had to go public. They had to expose Project Blackout before it was too late. Evelyn's mind raced. We need a broadcast. A public platform. Something they can't silence. Carter narrowed his eyes. The networks won't air this. The government owns the media. Evelyn's breath hitched. Then, she had an idea. Not a good one. Not a safe one. But their only one. "The Ledger," she gasped. Carter frowned. "What?" "The Ledger News Network. It's the only independent media group left that doesn't answer to the government. If we can get this to them, they'll air it." Carter hesitated. "Do you know someone there?" Evelyn exhaled sharply. "Yeah, I do." The last call. Carter weaved through the highway traffic, keeping 2 steps ahead of their pursuers. Evelyn dug out the burner phone, her fingers flying over the keypad. She only had one number that could save them now. She dialed. The call rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. "Evelyn." A shudder ran through her. "Nick," she whispered. "I need your help." Nick Foster had been her father's closest friend, a veteran investigative journalist who had fought corruption his entire life. If anyone could take this story and make it impossible to ignore, it was him. Nick's voice was sharp. "You're supposed to be in prison." Evelyn took a shaky breath. I broke out. A pause. Then, "Jesus Christ." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Nick, listen to me. I have something. Something huge. Project Blackout. My father was framed because of it." Nick went silent. Then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Where are you?" Evelyn met Carter's gaze. "We're coming to you." The broadcast. Nick's apartment was hidden deep inside the city, an old warehouse-turned-newsroom filled with stacks of papers and half-broken cameras. Nick pulled them inside, bolting the doors. He was in his 50s, rugged, and had the worn-out look of a man who had seen too much corruption for one lifetime. Evelyn slammed the flash drive onto his desk. "It's all here. The government's assassination program, my father's arrest, everything." Nick plugged in the drive, his eyes scanning the files. The color drained from his face. "My God," he breathed. Carter stood near the window, keeping watch for any movement outside. "They'll come for us the second this goes live," he warned. Nick's jaw tightened. "Then let's not waste time." He turned to his laptop, launching the Ledger's live broadcast channel. A countdown flashed on the screen. 60 seconds. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. 50 seconds. She thought of her father, of the months of fear and betrayal. 40 seconds. She thought of Sloan, bleeding out on the floor. 30 seconds. She thought of the people who had died to keep these secrets buried. 20 seconds. The truth was about to go global. 10 seconds. Carter muttered, "Here we go." 5, 4, 3. Then, a gunshot. Nick jerked backward, blood splattering across the laptop screen. Evelyn screamed. Carter grabbed her, shoving her behind the desk as bullets tore through the walls. The broadcast had begun. And now, They had to survive it. The final fight. The mercenaries stormed the newsroom, their rifles raised. Carter fired first, dropping the first man instantly. Evelyn ducked low, her heart hammering. The broadcast was still running. She had one chance. She grabbed Nick's microphone, her hands shaking. The camera light flashed green. She took a deep breath and spoke to the world. "My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am about to tell you the truth that the government doesn't want you to hear." Carter covered her as she exposed everything. The lies, the fraud, the assassinations. And once the world heard it, there was no going back.